Welcome back to the final video in this series, Reconciliation and Conflict Resolution. So let me ask you a question. How often have you avoided conflict? I have to admit, quite often over the years, I have avoided conflict.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have had to learn how to step into conflict.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable and you're human and I'm human and we don't want to, have these kind of conversations if we can avoid them.
That's right. And when, as executive coaches, working with lots of leaders, we're constantly having coaching conversations about conflict that somebody's having. Yeah. A particular challenge or event that happened, the drama du jour, that is occurring in the daily life of leaders. Mm-hmm. And so, part of the challenge in leadership is dealing with conflict versus avoiding conflict, right? And this is the focus of this video. And, one of the things that we know is that healthy conflict is essential for successful leadership, right? Absolutely. And so how do you do it? Because we want to make sure that we're not having artificial harmony and trying to avoid the conflict or having mean-spirited personal attacks, right? We want to attack issues, not people. And so we want to have this, what we call, healthy conflict, right? And ways to go about resolving it. So it is a skill that you can develop and you need to develop to be effective. So, Leanne, I'd love you to take the audience through here, the methodology using, sort of the ancient wisdom practices of how they went about dealing with conflict.
Yeah. Well, one practice that I know of, having lived in Hawaii, comes from the practice and actually the art form of what they call ho'oponopono. Now, in ancient Hawaii and even today in Hawaii, conflict is still not comfortable and it's easily avoided if we can. But what the native Hawaiian tradition would say is that it's natural, normal, human, and logical to get into conflict around things that matter, where you care deeply, opinions are going to differ, and the stakes are high. So you're going to, at some point, inevitably run into some sort of conflict. And there may be times that we make mistakes because we're human. And then we need to take ownership for that, but clear up the negative emotion and the residual impact in the relationship before it kind of stacks and stacks and stacks and becomes a huge source of interference for productive collaboration or meaningful relationships. And so we learned earlier in the series that the word pono means to kind of be in right relationship with. And ho'oponopono is this idea my native Hawaiian friends taught me that you can bring a relationship back into balance, into harmony together. And in fact, this is a practice I was really fortunate to witness. There's a whole skilled facilitative process that you can gain learning and certification in. It's deeply steeped in the Hawaiian cultural heritage and spiritual traditions in many ways. It's also a practical practice that is used in families and in businesses throughout the islands. And I just was so grateful to find it because honestly, I did not learn how to move through conflict in a productive, healthy manner. Even the idea of healthy conflict was like an oxymoron, or like, is that really possible? Because in my upbringing, it was not role modeled, right? And in fact, I saw perhaps the opposite of that. So I was unskilled in it. And so what I would offer is my understanding of the 4 steps of the Ho'oponopono process. Certainly there's a whole, again, rich tradition behind it. But the first step is, let's imagine that you have knowingly or even oftentimes unknowingly had a negative impact on someone else or some situation, something else, and even yourself. And so the first step is to actually acknowledge and express remorse, right? So it really is an I'm sorry and an ownership, a personal ownership for your actions. The second step then is to ask for forgiveness in a very sincere manner. And this has to be sincere and open-hearted. And there's a learning that I received in this tradition, and it was something like this, that it is far better and far bigger to forgive others than to carry the weight and the burden of blame. And having lived through betrayals and some situations that were, very difficult to go through, where I felt self-righteous and, I was not the one in the wrong, right? I can understand the allure of wanting to put the blame on someone else and not take ownership myself. But I think if I've found myself in conflict with somebody else, then we've collectively created results that neither one of us wants. And so even in that case, I kind of have to acknowledge what that is and ask for forgiveness. But in the second step, once you say you're sorry, you're asking for forgiveness. And if you find yourself asking for forgiveness, but you want to say, yeah, but at the end, it's a sign that you're not ready, right? And so, and just to be clear, when we are asked to grant forgiveness, it doesn't mean that you're going to completely erase that wrongdoing from memory. In fact, no, there's a way of looking straight on into what happened, but releasing the blame and allowing the softness of forgiveness. Because when we can get to a place of remembering an event without the deep emotional charge, that's where true wisdom and true freedom lies. And that's really what that second step is all about. Now, the third step is gratitude, and it's thank you. And, when you first have something difficult happen where there's a conflict or, there may even have been some serious wrongdoing at play, the last thing that you think is thank you for that, right? But in actuality, this is a step where you're saying thank you for who you are, for the lessons learned, for who I've become maybe as a result of this. Like I can look now back on that year in 2012 and I have a very good relationship with my ex-husband now, where we literally have gone through this kind of process, and I can say thank you for the learning that I got as a result of some of the hardships that we went through. I'm a better person as a result of it. I didn't like the packaging. I didn't like the wrapping at the time. But thank you for that. And then the fourth step is to express care, to express, love, really. And in a work environment, it might be, and I care about you. I want to continue to deepen our work relationship and give a token of care, or even a handshake or a hug or something, right? And a personal relationship, it's literally to say, I love you, right? And so this process is something that you can use in a team environment, in a family environment, in a personal relationship, in the community. It has great range. And when it's facilitated by a professional, there's actually witnesses to this process. But you could start off very simply by using it for yourself in one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, that's terrific. And, I want to just explore a little bit further, because if you're watching this, you might think, well, okay, I get that. If I've committed some wrongdoing or something and I want to, reconcile with somebody, often we find people talking about all these things that happen to them that other people aren't even aware of, and they're avoiding having that conversation.
Yeah.
So maybe, Leanne, if you could speak to those who feel like, hey, it's not me.
Yeah.
I've been wronged by these other people, and when are they going to step up with your process, Leanne, and come to me? Yeah. Right? So how might you help them recognize their part in this and what they can do about it?
Yeah, totally. Otherwise, you'll be like, I'm still waiting, right? So there's actually a team that went through this exact challenge recently that I worked with. And there was one individual that was struggling with follow through and kind of following up on certain items. And so one of the leaders actually was frustrated by that. And we had the conversation around, okay, rightfully so. It's actually impacting the workflow. It's impacting other deliverables. There's a breakdown of trust. There's some real justification for your frustration and anger on this. And yet, you're collectively together creating results that nobody wants. You're not leaning in to do anything to actually help or support or challenge or provide that feedback. And so, in what way are you contributing to that? And so we use the same framework in, begrudgingly at first, but then increasingly, right, open to the possibility that there might be some benefit of this. And this leader used this approach and said, listen, I've seen you struggle with follow through, and I'm really sorry that I haven't spoken up or brought this to your attention sooner. And I'd like to ask for you to forgive me, because I want to have a relationship with you where we can bring everything out in the open quickly and easily and effortlessly. And I have been stifling what I've been feeling. And so, to be honest, I'm grateful that it's gotten to a peak where was really uncomfortable for me to lean into this, but you were open to have this conversation. And I would like to say I care about you and I care about deepening our relationship. And so my request, this is the final step, is that we find a way that when you give your word, you're able to follow through and really be your word. How might we do that? And then it became kind of a conversation, and that was more co-creative.
Yeah, really great. Yeah, thank you for that. And really, when you talk about this process of forgiveness, right? There's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of research supporting the stress that goes away.
Yeah.
And we all, would say, hey, there's lots of stress in the world today and a lot of stress at work. And this power of forgiveness really is a big stress reducer. And there's a lot of data and support, to lower your blood pressure, and a lot of other health benefits associated with just this mere act of forgiveness, forgiving yourself and forgiving others, right? So this is very powerful. And it's fundamentally about letting go of negative emotion and just letting it go, right? And that process of letting go, if you don't, it's a barrier to breakthroughs.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's really critical that you practice this skill and development. And you can do it for yourself. So even if you've maybe haven't had your finest day, right? And you say, hey, I've done things, and people you may or may not be aware of the impact you've had on them, but you feel like, I haven't been at my best, or I've done something that's incongruent with what I really want to be all about. You can go through the same process with your wiser self.
Yeah.
So just have your younger self, the you now, talking to your wiser self of the future, and go through this process that Leanne identified, and practice building that skill for yourself, and then enable yourself to do that when you know that you've impacted others and you need to go through this process for them. So I hope that, process is really helpful for you.
Yeah, particularly if you are hard on yourself. I know that sometimes I can be my own worst critic. So this practice of I'm sorry to myself, right? Please forgive me, self. And, I'm grateful for that I'm still growing and learning, and hey, I still love myself and I'm going to get back in there. That's a healthy self-esteem practice. So that's another place to begin individually. So that wraps up our series on ancient wisdom for modern leadership. We hope that this exploration has been useful to you to really look at 6 different elements on how we can tap into more holistic, harmonious, really purpose-driven and kind of balanced sort of leadership that creates a climate of deeper meaning, impact, and connection. We hope to see you in future videos and inside of our communities. Thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us on the journey.
Absolutely.
Take good care.